Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the Great Council chamber and watched the alien delegates ignore everything he said. The massive room stretched out before him like a metal canyon, filled with creatures that looked like living crystals, giant lizards and floating balls of light. Each one represented a different species from across the galaxy, and each one thought humans were nothing more than annoying children who talked too much. The Galactic Council had been running things for over 3,000 years before humans even learned to build rockets. Now, 23 years after first contact, humans still sat at the small table in the back corner while the real decisions got made by species who had been traveling between stars when Earth was still covered in ice. Lisa Harper pressed her face against the observation window above the chamber floor. As a ship captain, she had seen plenty of alien worlds, but the council station still amazed her. The thing was bigger than most moons, built from materials that could survive anything the universe threw at them. Millions of beings from hundreds of different species lived and worked here, all following rules that had been written before humans discovered fire. Down on the chamber floor, Jake was trying to explain why the galaxy needed to worry about something called the Void Hunters. Lisa had read his reports, and they scared her more than anything she had ever seen. Entire star systems were disappearing at the edge of known space. Not destroyed or conquered, but simply gone, as if they had never existed at all. Alex Chun sat in the human science section, surrounded by data tablets and holographic displays that showed the evidence his team had gathered over the past 6 months. The pattern was clear to anyone who bothered to look. The Void Hunters moved in a spiral, consuming everything in their path and growing stronger with each system they devoured. At their current rate, they would reach council space within 2 years. The problem was getting anyone to listen. The Zephyrians, who looked like walking diamond sculptures, considered humans too primitive to understand real threats. The Croton Empire, led by creatures that resembled armored bears the size of elephants, thought human military technology was barely worth calling weapons. The Veil Collective, beings made of pure energy who rarely bothered to take physical form, viewed human concerns as the fears of children afraid of shadows. Council Speaker Thextai raised 4 of his 6 arms to signal for quiet. His species, the hegemony, had been leading the council for over 800 years. They looked like tall, thin people with too many joints and skin that changed color based on their mood. Right now, Thextai's skin showed the purple-green swirls that meant he was annoyed and wanted to move on to more important business. The delegation from Earth has presented their concerns about unusual activity in the outer systems, Thextai said in the mechanical voice that came from his translator device. These concerns have been noted and will be filed with the appropriate committees for future review. Jake felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. Future review meant never. The council had committees for everything, and most of them existed only to bury problems that might require actual work to solve. He had spent months preparing this presentation, working with the best human scientists and military officers to create a plan that could save billions of lives. Steve Rodriguez shifted in his seat behind Jake. As a military commander, Steve understood the threat better than most. The Void Hunters used technology that could shut down electronics, weapons that could tear holes in space itself, and tactics that drove defending soldiers insane with fear. Humanity had fought them 3 times in border skirmishes, and each battle had been worse than the last. Amy Foster, the youngest human officer in the delegation, watched the alien faces around the chamber. Most of them were not even paying attention to Jake's words. The Trilaxian ambassador was playing some kind of game on a personal device. The representative from the Spiral Confederation had actually fallen asleep, which was impressive since his species did not normally need rest. The Council's attitude toward humans had been the same from the beginning. When human ships first arrived at Council space, the aliens had treated them like curious pets. Humanity got a junior membership that came with trade rights and protection, but no real voice in decisions that affected the galaxy. Humans could sit in the chamber and talk, but when votes were taken, their opinions counted for almost nothing. This dismissal stung more because humans had proven themselves useful in small ways over the years. Human doctors had solved diseases that had puzzled alien scientists for centuries. Human engineers had designed better engines and computer systems that many species now used without giving credit. Human soldiers had fought alongside Council forces in border conflicts and shown courage that impressed even the warrior races, but none of that mattered when it came to big decisions. The Council saw humans as a young species that needed to learn patience and respect for their elders. The idea that humans might actually understand a threat better than ancient civilizations was impossible for most aliens to accept. Jake finished his presentation and returned to his seat, knowing that he had failed before he started. The Council would debate trade routes and territory disputes for the rest of the day while the real threat moved closer to their worlds. Behind him, Lisa caught his eye through the observation window and shook her head sadly. They both knew this would be humanity's last attempt to work within the system. 3 months passed like a slow nightmare. The Void Hunters had taken 12 more star systems, including 2 that belonged to Council member species. The Nexus Republic lost their mining colonies in a single day. The Amber Consortium watched their research stations vanish without sending so much as a distress signal. Still, the Council refused to believe that humanity might have answers they needed. Kate Sullivan brought the largest human fleet ever assembled to the Council station. 50 ships hung in space outside the diplomatic zone, each one representing the best technology humanity could build. The quantum drives that powered them could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of months. The psi-shields that protected them had been designed specifically to block the mental attacks that Void Hunters used to drive enemy crews insane. Kate had commanded fleets in 3 different wars, but she had never felt as frustrated as she did walking through the Council station corridors. Alien beings stepped aside as she passed, not out of respect, but because they considered her species unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The same traits that made humans effective fighters made other species nervous about having them around. The Council's military leadership agreed to meet with Kate only because the recent losses had made some of them desperate enough to listen to anyone with ideas. Warcast Commander Zephron of the Croton Empire dominated the room like a mountain of black metal armor. His species had been the galaxy's premier warriors for 2,000 years, and they did not appreciate suggestions from newcomers. "Your ships are too small and your weapons are too simple," Zephron announced before Kate could even begin her presentation. "Croton battlecruisers have shields that could deflect your entire fleet's firepower. What could you possibly teach us about warfare?" Kate kept her expression calm even though she wanted to point out that Croton battlecruisers had been completely useless against the Void Hunters. Instead, she activated a holographic display that showed the quantum resonance patterns her scientists had discovered. The Void Hunters used a form of technology that existed partially outside normal space, which was why conventional weapons could not touch them. "Human ships are smaller because we build them to be fast and hard to target," Kate explained. "Our weapons are simpler because simple systems keep working when exotic technology fails. We have fought the Void Hunters and learned how to hurt them." The alien officers around the table exchanged glances that clearly said they thought Kate was lying or delusional. The idea that primitive human technology could succeed where advanced alien science had failed was, too, ridiculous for them to consider seriously. Ben Walker tried a different approach in his meetings with the Council's Science Division. As humanity's leading expert on alien biology, Ben had studied every species in the galaxy and made discoveries that had revolutionized medicine and genetics. He knew that humans had one crucial advantage over every other intelligent race they had encountered. Humans were immune to the specific type of mental influence that Void Hunters used as a weapon. Every other species suffered from madness, memory loss, or complete mental breakdown when exposed to Void Hunter technology for more than a few minutes. Human brains, for reasons that scientists still did not fully understand, simply shrugged off attacks that could destroy alien minds. This immunity makes human soldiers invaluable in direct combat situations. Ben explained to a room full of alien scientists who looked like everything from walking plants to geometric shapes made of living metal. We can board Void Hunter vessels, operate in areas they control, and maintain tactical effectiveness where other species cannot function. Dr. Vexhai of the Celestial Institute, a being that resembled a cross between an octopus and a flower, made a sound that the translator rendered as dismissive laughter. Human biology is crude and simple compared to evolved species. Your resistance is probably just a side effect of primitive neural development. We prefer to rely on technology and strategy rather than biological accidents. The insult stung because it was typical of how the Council viewed humanity. Anything humans did well was dismissed as luck or accident. Anything they struggled with was proof that they were not ready for galactic civilization. The fact that this attitude was getting people killed did not seem to matter to anyone, except humans. Claire Davis worked in the intelligence division, where she had access to communication intercepts and data that most council members never saw. What she found in the classified files made her sick with worry and anger. 3 different council species were secretly negotiating with Void Hunter representatives, trying to arrange deals that would spare their worlds in exchange for information. About other species' defenses, the evidence was clear and damning. Communication logs, meeting schedules, and payment records all pointed to collaboration with the enemy. Claire brought her findings to the Council Security Committee, expecting them to be grateful for the warning about traitors in their midst. Instead, Committee Chairman Torax accused her of fabricating evidence to make humans seem more important. Your species has a history of paranoia and aggression, he said with the cold certainty of someone who had never questioned his own assumptions. These accusations are clearly an attempt to spread fear and discord among council members. We will not tolerate such behavior from junior species. The Security Committee voted to place restrictions on human intelligence activities and recommended that Claire be banned from accessing classified information. The same evidence that should have led to arrests and investigations was instead used as proof that humans could not be trusted with sensitive data. The final insult came 2 weeks later when the Council voted on Resolution 847C, which would officially limit human activities throughout Council space. The resolution claimed that human aggressive tendencies and unpredictable behavior made them unsuitable for involvement in galactic security matters. Human ships would be restricted to designated trade routes. Human personnel would be removed from joint military operations. Human intelligence officers would be reassigned to civilian duties. Jake Morrison stood at the same podium where he had warned about the Void Hunters and watched the vote tally appear on the main display. 847 species voted in favor of the restrictions. Only 12 voted against them, and most of those were small colonies that depended on human trade for survival. The message was clear. After 23 years of faithful service, billions of human lives saved through medical advances, and countless contributions to council technology and culture, humanity was still seen as a problem to be managed rather than an ally to be respected. Jake looked around the chamber at faces that ranged from smugly satisfied to completely indifferent. These beings had just voted to exclude the only species that understood the greatest threat their civilization had ever faced. They had chosen pride over survival, and they would all pay the price for that choice. As Jake walked out of the council chamber for the last time, he activated a secure communication device and sent a single coded message to Earth. The message contained only 2 words, but they would change the course of galactic history. Begin withdrawal. Jake Morrison sat alone in his office aboard the human diplomatic station, staring at the sealed orders that had arrived from Earth 6 hours ago. The message was simple, direct, and devastating in its implications. Operation Quiet Departure would begin immediately and be completed within 6 standard months. Every human citizen, facility, and asset would be withdrawn from Council space without fanfare or explanation. The plan had been prepared months earlier, during the early stages of the Void Hunter crisis, when human leadership realized that the Council would never accept their warnings or assistance. Now, with humanity officially restricted and marginalized, Earth's government had decided to cut their losses and focus on protecting their own people. Rachel Green coordinated the massive logistical operation from her command center on Luna Station. As head of the Human Colonial Administration, she oversaw 300 human settlements scattered throughout Council space. Mining colonies on asteroid belts, research stations orbiting gas giants, trading posts on busy commercial routes, and diplomatic facilities on dozens of alien worlds would all need to be evacuated quickly and quietly. The challenge was enormous. Over 2 million human civilians lived and worked in Council space, many of them in remote locations that required weeks of travel to reach. The evacuation fleet would need to move constantly for 6 months, making supply runs and passenger transfers. While maintaining the illusion that nothing unusual was happening, Tony Martinez commanded the civilian evacuation fleet from the bridge of the transport ship New Horizon. His fleet consisted of cargo haulers, passenger liners, and mobile refineries that could support themselves during the long journey home. Each ship had been modified with additional life support systems and expanded cargo bays to handle the massive numbers of people and equipment that would need to be moved. The evacuation began with the most remote settlements, places where human disappearance would be noticed last. Tony's ships arrived at mining stations and research outposts with orders to pack everything valuable and abandon everything else. Families who had lived on distant worlds for decades found themselves loading personal belongings into cargo containers and saying goodbye to homes they had spent years building. Susan Clark handled the military side of the withdrawal with the precision of someone who had planned similar operations before. As a major in the Human Colonial Defense Force, she understood that the military evacuation would be the most dangerous part of the entire operation. Human military bases contained sensitive technology and classified information that could not be allowed to fall into alien hands. Her teams worked around the clock to sanitize facilities and remove or destroy anything that might compromise human security. Quantum computers were wiped and physically destroyed. Weapons prototypes were loaded onto transport ships or reduced to scrap metal. Communication arrays were dismantled and their components scattered across multiple ships to prevent anyone from reconstructing them. The genius of Operation Quiet Departure lay in its subtlety. Humans did not storm out of Council space with angry speeches or dramatic gestures. Instead, they began quietly closing operations and citing routine administrative reasons for their actions. When alien authorities asked questions, human officials gave vague answers about budget constraints and policy reviews that made the withdrawals sound like normal bureaucratic decisions. Paul Johnson, who ran the Human Technology Exchange Program, played a crucial role in making the evacuation look routine. His job was to wind down all cooperative research projects and technical partnerships without alerting alien collaborators to the larger pattern. He told Zephyrian scientists that human funding for crystal matrix research had been redirected to other priorities. He informed Croton engineers that the Joint Weapons Development Program was being suspended pending policy reviews on Earth. Each individual decision seemed reasonable and unimportant. Taken together, they represented the systematic removal of human expertise from dozens of critical projects throughout Council space. Alien scientists and engineers who had grown dependent on human contributions suddenly found themselves working alone, often discovering that they did not fully understand the systems they had been using for years. Luke Thompson led the most sensitive part of the entire operation. His covert recovery teams had the job of finding and securing advanced human technology that had been integrated into alien systems over the past 2 decades. Human-designed computer processors powered everything from Council communication networks to alien military targeting systems. Human medical devices had been copied and mass-produced by several species. Human engineering improvements had been incorporated into starship designs throughout the galaxy. Thompson's teams worked like ghosts, slipping into facilities during maintenance periods and replacing human-designed components with alien alternatives that would work well enough to prevent immediate failures. They recovered prototype devices and experimental technology that alien scientists did not even know existed. They planted subtle sabotage programs that would cause non-critical system failures weeks or months after humans departed, creating the impression of normal equipment aging rather than deliberate interference, the most challenging part of Thompson's mission was dealing with hybrid technology that had been created through genuine cooperation between human and alien scientists. These systems could not be simply removed without causing obvious damage, so his teams had to carefully modify them to eliminate the most advanced human contributions while leaving enough functionality to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, on worlds throughout Council space, human families packed their belongings and tried to explain to alien friends and neighbors why they were leaving. Children who had grown up playing with alien classmates found themselves saying goodbye to the only home they had ever known. Adults who had built businesses and careers over decades had to abandon everything they had worked for and start over somewhere else. The emotional cost was enormous, but most humans understood the necessity. The Council had made it clear that humanity was not welcome as an equal partner in galactic civilization. Rather than stay where they were not wanted and continue fighting battles they could not win, humans would build their own civilization somewhere else. Some alien individuals noticed the pattern and asked questions, but their concerns were dismissed by authorities who did not want to acknowledge that they were losing a valuable resource. A few alien scientists panicked when they realized how much their research depended on human contributions, but their warnings were ignored by administrators, who considered humans easily replaceable. By the end of the third month, the evacuation was ahead of schedule. Human facilities throughout Council space were empty shells, their equipment and personnel relocated to ships that were already heading toward the galactic rim. The Council leadership remained oblivious to what was happening, focused on their own political struggles and the growing Void Hunter threat. Jake Morrison was among the last to leave, staying at his post until the final diplomatic formalities were completed. As his shuttle departed from the Council station for the last time, he looked back at the massive structure that had been the center of galactic politics for 3,000 years. Soon the aliens would discover what they had lost, but by then it would be too late to change anything. 6 months after the human withdrawal began, the Void Hunters launched their largest assault yet. 17 star systems fell in a single coordinated strike that lasted only 3 days. The attack was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, with the Void Hunters demonstrating new tactics and weapons that seemed specifically designed to counter traditional Council defenses. Fleet Admiral Corex of the Veil Collective watched his forces crumble as the reports flooded in from across the battle zone. The quantum disruption weapons that had protected Council fleets for over a millennium proved completely useless against the Void Hunter adaptive shielding. Worse, his crews were suffering from the mental degradation that accompanied prolonged exposure to Void Hunter technology, leaving entire ships drifting helplessly as their operators succumbed to madness. The Nethes Republic homeworld fell on the second day of the assault. The proud warrior species that had conquered half a dozen neighboring civilizations found themselves helpless against an enemy that could turn their own minds against them. The last transmission from their capital city was a garbled message about shadows moving through walls and voices speaking in languages that drove listeners insane. It was during the desperate search for answers that someone finally remembered the human reports gathering dust in the Council archives. Assistant researcher Velix pulled the files from storage almost by accident, looking for anything that might explain how the Void Hunters had become so much more effective. What she found made her question everything the Council had believed about human intelligence. Nina Ross had predicted this exact scenario 8 months earlier, down to the specific attack vectors and psychological warfare tactics the Void Hunters were now using. Her reports contained detailed analysis of Void Hunter behavioral patterns, technology assessments that proved accurate in every detail, and proposed countermeasures that suddenly looked like the work of a tactical genius. The human scientist had correctly identified the adaptive nature of Void Hunter shields, explaining how they evolved to counter whatever weapons were used against them. She had predicted that the creatures would develop new mental attack techniques based on their encounters with different species. Most importantly, She had proposed specific defensive strategies that could have prevented the current catastrophe. General Marcus Webb's military assessments, once dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of an aggressive species, now read like prophecies. He had correctly predicted the timing of the major assault, the likely targets, and the tactical approach the Void Hunters would use. His defensive recommendations included ship designs, weapon modifications, and crew training protocols that could have saved thousands of lives. The Council's attempts to contact the human government met with polite but firm rebuffs. George Hayes, the soft-spoken diplomat who had replaced Jake Morrison, explained that humanity was currently focusing on internal development projects and had no resources available for external conflicts. When pressed for more details, he simply smiled and suggested that the Council contact more experienced civilizations for assistance with their military problems. The irony was devastating and impossible to ignore. The species the Council had dismissed as primitive and unsuitable for galactic affairs were the only ones who had correctly assessed the threat and developed effective countermeasures. While ancient civilizations struggled to understand an enemy that defied their most advanced science, the young humans had figured out how to fight them months ago. Dr. Owen Blake, the Council's chief military analyst, conducted a thorough review of human intelligence reports and found a level of accuracy that bordered on the supernatural. Every major prediction had come true. Every tactical assessment had proven correct. Every strategic recommendation would have been effective if anyone had bothered to implement them. The humans had not just understood the Void Hunter threat better than anyone else. They had understood it better than species with thousands of years of military experience and scientific advancement. The implications were staggering and humbling for civilizations that had always considered themselves superior to the newcomers from Earth. Meanwhile, scattered reports began filtering in from the galaxy's edge about mysterious rescue operations. Refugee ships spoke of unknown vessels that appeared without warning to evacuate civilian populations just before Void Hunter attacks. The rescue ships used unfamiliar technology, but moved with a precision and effectiveness that suggested extensive knowledge of enemy capabilities. The ships were described as sleek and fast, built for speed rather than heavy armor or massive firepower. They struck Void Hunter forces with surgical precision, targeting specific weak points that conventional forces had never even identified. Most importantly, their crews seemed completely unaffected by the mental attacks that crippled other species. Captain Dale Murphy of the refugee transport Lucky Strike described an encounter that left him questioning everything he thought he knew about space combat. His ship had been trapped by a Void Hunter patrol when 3 unknown vessels appeared and destroyed the enemy force in less than 10 minutes. The attack was so precise and effective that it looked like the mysterious ships had been specifically designed to fight Void Hunters. They knew exactly where to hit them, Murphy reported to Council intelligence officers. It was like they had blueprints showing every weak point and vulnerability. The Void Hunters tried their mind tricks, but it didn't even slow the attackers down. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of flying. The refugee testimonies painted a picture of a systematic rescue and resistance operation being conducted by forces that remained completely anonymous. The rescue ships never identified themselves or communicated with the people they saved. They simply appeared, eliminated Void Hunter forces, evacuated civilians, and disappeared back into deep space. Council intelligence analysts tried to identify the mysterious vessels, using every database and recognition system available to them. The ships used technology that seemed oddly familiar but could not be matched to any known design. The tactical approaches they employed followed patterns that reminded analysts of something they had seen before but could not quite place. Julie Collins, one of the few human scientists still in contact with Council researchers, accidentally let slip a crucial detail during a routine communication about medical research. She mentioned that humanity had been quite busy lately with expansion projects in previously unexplored regions of the galaxy, establishing new colonies and trade relationships beyond the traditional borders of known space. The comment seemed innocent enough, but it sent shockwaves through the Council intelligence community. If humans were expanding into unknown regions, they might have encountered the Void Hunters earlier and in different circumstances than anyone realized. They might have been fighting this war for years while the Council remained ignorant of the threat. The terrible truth began to dawn on the Council leadership. While they had dismissed humanity as backward and insignificant, the humans had been building their own galactic civilization in regions the Council had never bothered to explore. They had encountered the Void Hunter threat firsthand, learned how to fight them effectively, and developed countermeasures that could save billions of lives. Now, as established civilizations faced extinction, the species they had scorned was thriving somewhere beyond their reach. The humans had not just survived the dismissal and restrictions placed on them by the Council. They had used their freedom to become exactly what the galaxy needed most. While their former critics struggled to understand an enemy that humanity had already learned to defeat, the Council chamber that had once echoed with confident speeches about galactic superiority now filled with desperate discussions about survival. The ancient species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia found themselves in the humbling position of needing help from the primitive newcomers they had rejected. But the humans were gone, and they had taken their knowledge with them. 2 years had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and the galaxy was burning. The Void Hunters consumed system after system with increasing speed and efficiency, their tactics evolving faster than Council forces could adapt. Panic spread through the remaining member species as they realized that their ancient civilizations were helpless against an enemy they still barely understood, the Council Chamber. Once a symbol of galactic unity and wisdom had become a place of desperate finger-pointing and bitter recriminations. Species that had worked together for thousands of years now accused each other of incompetence and cowardice. The Zephyrian delegation blamed the Croton military for failing to stop the advance. The Croton Empire accused the Veil Collective of providing inadequate intelligence. Everyone looked for someone else to blame for the catastrophe unfolding around them. Helen Foster of the Council Intelligence Division conducted the most thorough review of human intelligence reports in galactic history. What she found painted a picture of missed opportunities and willful blindness that made her sick with regret. Every warning had been accurate, every prediction had come true. Every recommendation would have been effective if anyone had possessed the wisdom to listen. The humans had not just understood the Void Hunter threat better than anyone else. They had prepared for it systematically and scientifically, developing countermeasures while the Council debated trade regulations and territorial disputes. The documentation showed a level of strategic thinking and tactical innovation that surpassed anything the galaxy's most ancient civilizations had produced. Foster's report triggered a wave of desperate attempts to re-establish contact with humanity. The Council sent envoys to every known human world, only to find empty colonies and abandoned stations. They tried diplomatic channels that had been closed for months. They even attempted to trace human ship movements through hyperspace, but the trails led to regions of space that Council vessels had never explored. Carl Mitchell, speaking for the human government, received the Council's increasingly frantic messages with polite but firm responses. When offered full Council membership with voting rights equal to the founding species, he thanked them for the generous gesture but explained that humanity had found other arrangements more suitable to their current needs and objectives. The offer of membership was followed by promises of technological exchange, military cooperation, and even territorial concessions. The Council was willing to give humans entire star systems if they would just share their knowledge of how to fight the Void Hunters. Mitchell's responses remained courteous but inflexible. Humanity was no longer interested in joining organizations that had proven themselves incapable of recognizing value or potential. Meanwhile, the mysterious rescue operations continued at the galaxy's edge. Refugee reports painted an increasingly clear picture of a systematic campaign being conducted by forces that possessed intimate knowledge of Void Hunter capabilities. The rescue ships appeared wherever civilians needed evacuation, struck with surgical precision against enemy forces, and vanished before conventional reinforcements could arrive. The rescued population spoke of their saviors with awe and gratitude. The unknown ships arrived exactly when they were needed most, as if their crews possessed advanced knowledge of Void Hunter attack plans. They evacuated civilians with efficiency that suggested extensive experience with similar operations. Most importantly, they fought the Void Hunters as equals, showing none of the fear or confusion that paralyzed other species. Captain Roy Jackson of the merchant vessel Distant Star provided the most detailed account of an encounter with the mysterious rescue fleet. His ship had been trapped in a system under Void Hunter attack, when 6 unknown vessels appeared and engaged the enemy force with devastating effectiveness. They moved like they had been fighting these things for years, Jackson reported to Council investigators. Every maneuver was perfect, every attack hit exactly the right target. The Void Hunters tried their usual tricks, but it was like the attackers were immune to everything they threw at them. In 20 minutes, it was over, and we were being escorted to safety by ships that wouldn't even tell us their names. The tactical analysis of these encounters revealed patterns that made Council military experts deeply uncomfortable. The rescue. Ships used technology that was clearly advanced but not exotic, built for effectiveness rather than intimidation. Their crews demonstrated tactical knowledge that could only come from extensive combat experience against Void Hunter forces. Most disturbing of all, they seemed completely unaffected by the mental attacks that had broken the minds of countless alien soldiers. Dr. Rita Wells, working with what remained of the Council's Xenobiology Department, made a connection that sent shockwaves through the leadership. The immunity to Void Hunter mental attacks was a trait that had been documented in only one known species. Humans possessed a unique neurological structure that made them resistant to the specific type of psychic influence that the Void Hunters used as a weapon. The implications were staggering. If the rescue ships were crewed by humans, it meant that humanity had not just withdrawn from Council space. They had established a military force specifically designed to fight the Void Hunters, using their natural immunity as a tactical advantage that no other species could match. While the Council struggled to understand their enemy, humans had been developing the expertise to defeat them. Julie Collins, in her final communication with Council scientists before her research station was evacuated, confirmed what many had begun to suspect. Humanity had indeed expanded into regions beyond Council space, establishing colonies and defensive positions in areas that traditional galactic civilization had never bothered to explore. They had encountered the Void Hunter threat years earlier than anyone realized and had used that time to develop effective countermeasures. "We tried to warn you," Collins said during her last transmission. "We offered to share everything we had, learned to fight alongside you as equals. You chose to treat us as children who needed to learn their place. Now you're facing the consequences of that choice." The Council's final attempt to reach humanity came in the form of a direct appeal from Council Speaker Thextai himself. The leader who had dismissed human warnings 2 years earlier now sent a formal request for assistance, acknowledging humanity's expertise and offering them leadership roles in the galactic defense effort. The response came not from Earth's government but from Admiral Kate Sullivan, now commanding what appeared to be a substantial military force in the unexplored regions beyond Council space. Her message was respectful but devastating in its implications. The Human Colonial Federation will continue to provide humanitarian assistance to civilian populations threatened by Void Hunter forces, Sullivan wrote. However, we will not coordinate military operations with Council forces or share our defensive technologies with member species. We offered cooperation once, and were told that our contributions were unwanted. We will not make that mistake again. The message included detailed information about safe evacuation routes and refugee processing centers that humanity had established beyond Council borders. They would save whoever could be saved, but they would not risk their own people to defend civilizations that had rejected them. The galaxy's greatest civilizations would face their fate alone, while humanity built something better in the darkness. Beyond known space, the Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They had dismissed the one species capable of saving them, and now faced extinction while their former subjects thrived in exile. The ancient civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia had been reduced to begging for help from the primitive newcomers they had rejected, only to discover that their rejection was final and irrevocable. In their quiet competence and dignified withdrawal, humanity had achieved the ultimate victory. They had proven their worth through actions while their critics faced the consequences of their blindness. The humans had departed in silence, leaving behind only the crushing weight of regret and the bitter knowledge of what might have been. 5 years had passed since humanity's departure, and the Galactic Council was a hollow shell of its former glory. Nearly half of the member species had either been consumed by the Void Hunters or fled to distant galaxies in desperate attempts to escape the advancing darkness. The remaining civilizations huddled in increasingly isolated pockets of space, their mighty fleets reduced to desperate defensive actions that barely slowed the enemy advance. The Council station itself had been evacuated 3 times as Void Hunter forces swept through the core systems. What had once been the center of galactic civilization was now a mobile command post, jumping from system to system ahead of an enemy that seemed to anticipate every defensive strategy the ancient races could devise. Council Speaker Thextai stood in the cramped emergency command center aboard the refugee ship Eternal Hope, staring at tactical displays that showed the continuing collapse of everything his species had built over thousands of years. The hegemony homeworld had fallen 6 months ago, taking with it the accumulated wisdom and culture of one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Around him, the surviving council members struggled to coordinate a defense that everyone knew was doomed to failure. The Zephyrian crystals that had once sparkled with confident energy now flickered weakly, their light dimmed by despair. The massive Crotan warriors who had never known defeat sat in stunned silence, their armor scarred from battles they could not win. The ethereal Veil Collective barely maintained physical form, their energy signatures weak and unstable. The reports from the Outer Rim told the same story everywhere. Void Hunter forces appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and left nothing but empty space where thriving civilizations had existed for millennia. The enemy had evolved beyond anything the Council could comprehend, adapting to counter every weapon and tactic the galaxy's greatest military minds could devise. Yet scattered among the reports of destruction and defeat were stories that offered a different perspective on the war. Refugee ships spoke of mysterious saviors who appeared at the moment of greatest need, evacuating civilian populations with efficiency that bordered on the miraculous. These unknown vessels fought the Void Hunters as equals, demonstrating a level of tactical knowledge and effectiveness that no Council species had achieved. Captain Marie Sanders of the refugee transport Golden Dawn provided testimony that haunted Council intelligence analysts. Her ship had been trapped in a system under attack when a fleet of sleek, unfamiliar vessels appeared and engaged the Void Hunter forces with surgical precision. They knew exactly what they were doing, Sanders reported during her debriefing. Every move was calculated, every attack perfectly timed. The Void Hunters threw everything they had at them, but it was like fighting ghosts. The rescue ships were there when they needed to be and gone when staying would have been dangerous. They saved over 50,000 civilians without losing a single vessel. The pattern was consistent across dozens of similar encounters. The mysterious rescue fleets operated with knowledge that could only come from years of combat experience against Void Hunter forces. They used technology that was advanced but not exotic, built for effectiveness rather than intimidation. Most telling of all, their crews showed complete immunity to the mental attacks that had broken the minds of countless alien soldiers. Admiral Douglas Wright, formerly of the Human Colonial Defense Force and now commanding the rescue operations, watched the latest evacuation from the bridge of his flagship Liberty. His fleet had grown from the original human evacuation vessels to a formidable force, specifically designed to fight the Void Hunters. Every ship had been built or modified based on hard-won experience in battles that the Council had never believed were possible. The humans had not simply withdrawn from Council space and built a new civilization in exile. They had used their freedom to become exactly what the galaxy needed most: a military force capable of fighting the Void Hunters on equal terms. While ancient civilizations struggled to understand an enemy that defied their science, humanity had spent years learning to defeat them through trial, error, and the unique advantages of human biology. Dr. Sandra Clark, now director of the Human Void Hunter Research Institute, reviewed the latest intelligence reports from Council Space with a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal sadness. Every prediction her teams had made years earlier was coming true with frightening accuracy. The humans had offered this knowledge freely to the Council, only to be dismissed as primitive alarmists who did not understand the complexities of galactic politics. The irony was complete and devastating. The species the Council had considered too young and aggressive for civilized society had become the galaxy's most effective defenders. While ancient races faced extinction, humanity thrived in regions beyond Council borders. Building a civilization specifically designed to survive and prosper in a universe where the Void Hunters existed, the Human Colonial Federation now controlled vast territories in previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. Their colonies were protected by defensive systems that had proven impervious to Void Hunter attacks. Their fleets patrolled trade routes that Council ships had never imagined existed. Their researchers had unlocked secrets of Void Hunter technology that the galaxy's oldest civilizations could not comprehend. General Patricia Moore, Supreme Commander of Human Colonial Defense Forces, received the Council's final plea for assistance. While reviewing plans for the next phase of human expansion, former Council Speaker Thextai, now reduced to commanding a refugee fleet, offered humanity complete leadership of the galactic defense effort in exchange for their help in stopping the Void Hunter advance. Moore's response was respectful but final. The Human Colonial Federation would continue to provide humanitarian assistance to civilian populations threatened by Void Hunter forces, but they would not risk their citizens to defend civilizations that had rejected them. The Council species would need to face the consequences of their choices alone. The message included coordinates for refugee processing centers that humanity had established beyond Council borders. Any civilian population willing to abandon their traditional territories and accept human protection would be welcomed into the Colonial Federation. But there would be no military intervention to save the Council worlds, no sharing of technology with species that had dismissed human expertise, and no coordination with forces that had proven themselves incapable of recognizing value. The final evacuation ships departed from the last Council strongholds as Void Hunter forces closed in for what appeared to be the final assault. Millions of refugees fled toward human space, carrying with them the accumulated wisdom of civilizations that stretched back thousands of years. Behind them, empty worlds and silent stations marked the end of the galactic order that had ruled the galaxy since before humans learned to build fires. In the Human Colonial Federation, the refugees found a civilization that had been built from the ground up to face the realities of a galaxy where the Void Hunters existed. Human cities were protected by shields that could repel any known attack. Human fleets patrolled space lanes with the confidence of warriors who had never lost a battle they chose to fight. Human scientists worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible while remaining grounded in practical applications. The Council chamber that had once echoed with the proud voices of galactic civilization now existed only in the memory of refugees who had learned too late the value of the allies they had rejected. The humans had departed in silence, taking with them the knowledge and expertise that could have saved the galaxy. In their wake, they left only the crushing weight of regret and the bitter understanding of what arrogance and blindness had cost. Humanity had achieved the ultimate victory not through conquest or domination, but by proving their worth through quiet competence while their former critics faced extinction. The galaxy's greatest civilizations had fallen because they could not recognize greatness when it stood before them, asking only for the chance to help. The humans had offered cooperation and been given restrictions. They had offered knowledge and been given dismissal. Now they offered only evacuation to those wise enough to accept it. The silence that had followed humanity's departure was finally complete.